Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Eagle. We are starting season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County. Conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head on. I am your host, Laura Krigo. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/altereagle. That's betterhelp.com/altereagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. In January, I sat down with U.S. Representative Mike Kelly to discuss his position on stigma surrounding addiction, how he handles the topic on a personal level, and is it possible to create legislation specific to stigma? I feel really honored to be in this position because I feel Tammy saw that in me when we first met.
Yeah.
I walked up to her at the restaurant I was working at. I didn't want to be a server anymore. I had moved back to Butler in 2022 and needed to get a job and focus on my mental health. And then after a few months, I started to think, okay, what do I want to do? And I had been a podcaster. I had been studying voiceover for about 4 years. I had some experience in college with that, and that was what I really wanted to do. And I just sort of kept looking into jobs. I was constantly looking for jobs when it came to whether it was radio, even if it was an internship, just to get my foot in the door. I'm the type of person that's like, even if I have to get my foot in the door and show them like that I'm here to work and that I have the talent and I have the knowledge. And I just got lucky.
You just hit on something though. You said help my mental being together.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has some talent.
Yes.
The key is for parents and teachers and preachers and things like, find out what that talent is and help that individual get the optimal value out of his or her skills. I think there's so many people they're in the wrong position,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of your time, you say, "Gosh, I wish I had done this. Or I wish I had tried that." But at the time, it just wasn't there for me. And I've talked to so many people. The people I grew up with. Now we've all gone through pretty much most of our life.
Mm-hmm.
We've the most important job ever. Of course, we've been able to raise families, but I always thought public education is really, really critical. And when you look at different people, there's no person out there that doesn't have some talent that they couldn't get better at. And I think if you can find that early and then coach people to the top, that's incredibly valuable. And the other side of this, if you don't know what you're doing, don't keep doing it. Go to somebody who does know and ask them.
Exactly.
And they'll help you. They'll help you be successful. They'll help you stay healthy or whatever.
Well, be willing to learn, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's something that I want to go back to college. I want to get a master's, and I'm sort of looking into that now. Like, what does that mean? My undergrad I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting with a comm minor, but what do I want to teach? But I feel like I still need more experience in order to teach. So 10 years down the road, I could see myself teaching, but it's a matter of Do I want to stay in that theater realm? Do I want to get into this more, into the voiceover aspect? There's so many opportunities. I never would have thought I'd be doing this right now. I could have never
Yeah.
imagined picking
Yeah.
up the Eagle as an afternoon paper when I was a kid, getting off the school bus and grabbing the Eagle, that I'd be working here someday. But it feels really good. And I have my own office and I have all of this.
Yeah.
And Tammy trusted me.
But you really hit on something. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, the debate was why should we still be funding the arts? And I think, uh, what a tragic thing that would be, not to fund the arts. I mean, if you want to be fully educated, then be fully educated. And that's
Mhm.
with a U and two L's, not with two O's and an L.
Mhm.
Because I really do believe that sometimes we become penny wise and pound foolish. And when you're looking at a fully educated person, they're going to make a contribution somewhere along the line. They're going to rise to a level that they may never have had an opportunity to rise before. And I think that that's the beauty of America,
Yeah.
because I don't care where you started
Mhm.
and where you finished. A lot of it, look, it's what did God grace you with? How were you able to hone those skills? What were you able to do afterwards with them to share them with other people? If you can do that, I think at the end of your life, you look back and say, you know what, time well spent.
I love that. I love that you just said that. And that's how we're starting our conversation.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, great.
Good
Oh,
deal.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And I love that you're taking time to sit with me today. So feels really special that you knew my dad. It's something that someone that I always think of. And I think, what would he say? How would he guide me? And I've really tried to honor him in my life rather than taking those days that maybe bring up memories of he's not here anymore. But what can I do since he's not here anymore? How can I make a difference? And
Well, I think the good thing about what you just said, because of your mom and your dad,
Mhm.
he still is here all the time. And
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
whenever we look back, if people were to ask you, so who made a difference in your life? I said, well, who didn't? You know
Yeah.
what? I've been so blessed for so long. I used to say I was lucky. People say, where are you from? I said, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I grew up in Butler at the best town at the best times with parents and preachers and teachers and coaches. I was so lucky. And I said that at a
Mhm.
graduation at a 50th reunion. And everybody at the table said, you know what? That's right. We really were lucky, except for one girl. And I said, Linda, you don't think we were lucky? She says, no, I don't think we were lucky at all. I said, seriously? I said, well, then what were we? He said, we were blessed. I said, I will never again in my life say I was lucky. I was
Blessed.
truly blessed by the people that touched our lives. So,
Yeah.
so you mentioned your dad. Your dad and I grew up together.
Mhm.
So when I think of Wilbur, I think of things that we did together, whether it was playing football, playing baseball, uh, before practice, watching him drop kick because he had a special talent that nobody people used to look and say, "How do you do that?" He said, "It's easy. It's all you do." Well, that
That sounds
so
about
that
right.
was
Yeah.
him, though, right?
Yeah.
So it was easy for him.
Yeah.
Nobody else could do it,
Yeah.
but we did a lot of things together. We grew up together,
Mhm.
and I think that we were truly blessed to be able to come back to this town where we grew up, and to get married and to have children and to even participate as you kids were growing up. So truly blessed. Truly
Yes.
blessed.
I appreciate that so much. Everything
Mm.
you said about my dad. He really was a wonderful man. Is still. His spirit lives on. So today I'm speaking with U.S. Representative Mike Kelly, who proudly serves the 16th District of Pennsylvania. 1966 graduate of Butler High School. You've lived in Butler for over 50 years, where you still reside with your wife, Victoria. A father of 4 and grandfather to 10. What's that like?
Scary. It's scary, now. So, and I'm sure there's friends of mine that go through the same thing. So whenever you get a call and they say, "Hey, Grandpa," and my answer right away is, "How much? How much?" I mean, nobody calls it, "Grandpa, how you feeling, Grandpa?"
Yeah.
And they'll always say, "Grandpa, could you help me?" And I say, "Uh-huh. Yes, yes."
How much?
Yes, your grandmother and I'll talk with her and see what we can do. But I think that's the beauty of it. You have to have go-to people.
Yes.
In my life, again, going back to the people that I always went to was either family or teachers and coaches
Mhm.
and friends. So I think that's the beauty of who it is that we are as human beings. But that's really strategic, and I think that, like what you've been through, uh, you look at that and say, okay, so today may be a little bit challenging, but I got tomorrow. I got tomorrow, and for me, if anybody had asked me, geez, you ever want to serve in politics? I go, are you kidding me? No.
You got into this because the Washington Post said you got an itch, right, to run for Congress in
Yeah.
2009
Yeah.
after the government took over General Motors. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about that a little bit more in the arbitration that followed, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That was a family business your father started. So that's something to fight for.
Well, my mom and dad started in a little town called Verona in 1953 with a one-car showroom and about 6 service bays. At that time, so in 1953, I was 5 years old, going on 6 years old when they started. I used to ride with my dad down to the railroad station, and they'd take the cars off the garage, and my dad would bring them back to our house, and he would do what they call the pre-service on it, right? Um, and I just, but I thought everybody's dad did that. And in 1957, we moved to Butler, became a Chevrolet Cadillac dealer instead of just a Chevrolet dealer. Right away, the country went into a recession. We almost lost the business then because everything my dad was able to do was because somebody had faith in him to lend him the money to do it. We went through some tough times. I never knew they were tough times, honestly, because my dad never brought it home. But again, they had been through the Great Depression. They'd been through World War II, and when I look back on it, there's a reason why they're called the greatest generation, and they truly are the greatest generation. And we don't have enough of them left now. But so you go through that experience. Went on, graduated from high school, went on, graduated from college, came back home, went to work for the dealership. Uh, and then came a time that my dad had decided, he said, it's time now for turning over the business. And so myself, my brother Bobby, and my brother Ike, we were all working at the same business. But my dad, when he called us into his office, I thought, well, hey guys, he's going to turn the business over to us. No, he was willing to sell the business to us. And I think that was a real wake-up call because he said, guys, it's time to do a changeover. And your mother and I have worked all our lives. We reached a point where we've got you started, and now you're gonna, if you choose to do so, you can stay in the automobile business. So we were, yeah, fine, Dad, we're gonna do it. He says, okay, now keep in mind, nobody gave it to Mom and me. We had to go out and borrow money to do it. So you guys have first opportunity to buy it. And it was like, uh-oh. Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
We didn't think that's how this was going, but that's a wonderful lesson, right?
Yeah, it really was. And so whenever the termination came to the three of us, he started with the youngest and then the second youngest, then got to me. And he said, so you're the last guy standing. What do you want to do? I said, I'll buy it. And he goes, okay, that's great. And I said, okay, fine. Now, how much will I pay you each month? And he said, how much would you pay? Why would you pay me? I said, well, I'm going to buy the business from you. And he goes, I'm not a bank. Go to a bank and find out, do they have enough faith in you to lend you the money? I said, but why can't I just make payments to you? He says, if I allow you to do that, there will be times where you think you can call me up and say, it's really tough right now. Can we put off making a payment this month? And he said, you know what? Being your father, I may be weak at that time and say, yeah, and no. I'm not going to let you do that because it would be a disservice to you. So that's the way we started. It was a family-run business, and my brothers, we really had a very, a great childhood growing up. But then the rubber meets the road, and you realize, well, somebody had to pay for this all the time. Now, this is, by the way, it's only because I wanted to stay in Butler, and I wanted to stay in that business.
Yeah.
And there was nobody else that came to me and said, you want to buy a dealership? So that was the one that was available to me. That's the one we bought. And so we ended up staying here, and I was fine. I was fine until I got a 39-page letter from General Motors saying we're now run by the U.S. government. And by the way, you're no longer going to be a Cadillac dealer. And I said, well, why am I not going to be a Cadillac dealer? They said, well, we've made the decision that you're going to have to relinquish the Cadillac dealership. I said, well, these are 5-year dealer agreements. I'm 2 years into an agreement. So I still have 3 years left. And they said, well, that was with the old General Motors. With us, you do not. And I said, really? And I said, so I don't agree with that. Well, say, well, if you want, you can go to arbitration. But if you think Mike Kelly in Little Butler, Pennsylvania can fight the U.S. government, good luck on that one. And I said at the time, well, listen, I don't know that I can beat you, but I do know this. If I don't try to, I'll never be able to wake up in the morning and think, what could have been?
Yes.
And so, look, we went to arbitration. We ended up winning in the arbitration. Heavy bill for the legal advice on it, but was able to keep the dealership and then and went forward. But thank God, I think back on it, I'm glad my mom and dad had passed, because if anybody had ever called my father from Chevrolet or Cadillac and said, you know what, we're going to take the business away from you, it would have been one heck of a battle, because that generation never gave up anything without a fight. They
Mm.
may lose, but they fought to their
They're
last
still
ounce of
willing to
strength.
fight.
So that, I was blessed again just
Yeah.
by them raising me.
Well, good for you. I love that. I'm sure there were times though in there that you were like, okay, this is happening? This is what we're doing. But you felt it, right, in your soul. You felt it in your gut that it was
Yeah.
just like, this is what I'm doing.
Well, I mean,
You had to know.
think about it, Laura. So somebody who's never spent 1 second in your business, never contributed $1, is telling you they're going to put you out of business. And at that point, I said, this government has gotten to be the most invasive species in our life is our government. I mean,
Hmm.
they do a lot of good things, but we fund it all. Taxpayers fund it all. So all the good that the government does, go back and thank a taxpayer for that. So it was just a point of you either got to cut or you got to fish or cut bait. And at that time, I thought this was the thing to do. And actually, it worked out for us. But at that point, I realized never again in my life am I going to have somebody who's not involved in my life
Hmm.
make life-changing decisions for me. And there became an opportunity to run for Congress. And so I did. Me and 14 other people were in the primary. Well, it's not, I didn't know what it was like. I thought it was like that for everybody. I didn't know. Some people went unopposed. I didn't know I said, what does that mean? It's like somebody forfeits the game to you. I said, well, that never happened at Butler when we played. So I don't
Uh-huh.
understand what that means. So anyways, so won the primary and then won in the general election. Of course, President Obama was still in office, and Harry Reid ran the Senate. So it was a Democrat House or Senate. It was a Democrat in the White House, but it was a Republican Congress. And so, as you know, all the legislative thing happens between the House and the Senate.
Hmm.
And from there, we were able to start making incremental changes of taking a look at the way things were going. And if you don't agree with them, you don't be mean about it, but stand up and talk about it and say, this is why I think the way I think. So that was interesting. Then when we got the Senate, then it was a little bit easier because we could pass them from the House to the Senate. The Senate would do whatever they needed to do to that bill and then pass it back to us, would refine it, and then would send it down to the White House. Now, President Obama wasn't really, he's a Democrat, he wasn't really going to sign everything that the Republican legislators sent to him. But he looked at the things that were worthwhile doing, and we did them. And then when President Trump came into office, I can remember Paul Ryan, who at the time was our speaker. We won the House, we won the Senate, and we won the presidency. And the day after the election, we had a 7 o'clock conference call in the morning, and Paul Ryan said, guys, I don't know that you all realize this. I've been here for a long time. This has never been anything that's happened to us. It wasn't under his turn, and under my turn, certainly not either. But the fact that we had the White House, the House, and the Senate, we were able to start moving forward with a lot of really good legislation. What we thought was good
Of
legislation,
course.
we were able to get it through, and a lot of it was bicameral and bipartisan. So um, this changed again and split back, and so we lost the House, we lost the Senate, we lost the White House, and at that point, from 2020 on, I've been looking at a lot of spending that had to be done. I get that, but
Hmm.
there's also a lot that put us way over the edge and put us deeper and deeper in debt.
And I love that we printed this for you.
Oh yes,
So
right here,
right here
yeah.
in this building where we are.
Too many
Yeah.
times people get bad news, and we said, you know what, we're going to start maybe not the way you'd like it to be, but there still are a lot of good things going on in our
Mhm.
country. There's nobody leaving. There's a lot of people coming in. There's nobody leaving. They're coming in by the millions. They're not leaving by the millions. So it's still the greatest place in the world to live. Interest rates have gone up, but the cost of everything in our lives have gone up. And especially it started with energy, because there's nothing that we consume that at the very base of it, it's not the cost of energy. And I think we have to be very much aware of that. And the other thing, this is a different world we're in. This is a very, very touchy situation we're in. I don't think we've ever been in graver danger than we are now. Uh, so the world that my parents grew up in World War II, we had oceans protecting us on either side. That's not the case anymore. And really where we're vulnerable is with our
Mhm.
economy,
Yeah.
because it's a global supply chain and we rely on a lot of people for a lot of things that it may not be in our best interest to have gone that way. And it's been certainly in some of their best interest, because they can just shut off supplies to us. Say, okay, fine, you don't want to do it, fine. We'll just shut off your supply or make it so expensive you can't get it. So, but the energy is the one that bothers, because we don't need to go offshore. We were the leading energy producer in the world, and then we decided to stop producing energy domestically, and that's really had a heck of a touch. It just really
Yeah.
knocked our feet out from under us.
I agree. And we could just keep talking about that. I feel like I could keep talking about that. But
Well,
we are going to talk a little bit more about this season as the parent of a recovering addict, someone in your stature. Obviously, you've had to face stigma with that. I want you to tell me a little bit more about that experience.
well, things are always concerning to you until it becomes one of your own. Then it becomes a crisis. And while we can feel bad about what somebody else is going through, I really am looking at the possibility of a lost generation. A lot of what's happening today is the amount of drugs that have come into our country, and it's so marketable. I was down at the border, the southwestern border. They can't control the amount of fentanyl that's coming in. They just can't. The other concern, as you know, we have is our northern border.
Mm-hmm.
And when people say, I don't know why you'd be worried about that, I said, well, it's 5,500 miles of border, continuous border, longest in the world. The border control is not able to watch it. In some cases, in one case, we have over 500 miles that we have two people watching it. So imagine getting in your car from driving from Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
to the middle of Ohio, turn around and coming back and say, you didn't see a state policeman anywhere? Nope. You didn't see anybody? Nope. Well, what makes us think that that border is safe? Now, when you look at the southwestern border, we have been overrun. I like the former administration of putting up the wall, the fence,
Mm-hmm.
because it made it you could still get into America, but get in the right way. Don't rush her borders and then expect her to be welcoming when you get here. Listen, we need people to come in. I get that. But that southwestern border right now is open. We have no idea who it is that's come into our country. And there is no state that is not a border state. The government has repositioned these people all over the country. I can't imagine that. I saw the number, and I'm not remembering exactly the number of children that are now in America that are not attached to a parent or a relative, and we've lost them. Nobody knows where they are. And you say, well, why would they? Because when they came in, we didn't know who they were, and they were down in Texas like for 48 hours to 72 hours. And when I went down to visit, I was talking to the border people. I said, so how do you know where you're sending these people? Oh, we know. I said, you're telling me that children are coming here unaccompanied by an adult, and you're able to find their relatives in America? Well, most of the time. I said, okay, so what happens about the others that you have no idea where they are? That's an untold story, and that's something, if as welcoming as we are as a country, what a sin it is to have those children. We have no idea what happened to them, where they are. So when you look at the borders, look, we want people to come in. We need people to come in. Um, but as long as you come in with the idea that you're going to make America stronger and America greater, I think that's great. Have the great opportunity to come here. Yes, I get that. Every one of us, at one point or another, with the exception of the Native Indians. I mean, we all came here from somewhere, but to get here then was not easy. And you had to come through the right way. And one of the big things of Ellis Island was trying to control any type of sickness or illness or disease. So you have to know who it is that's coming across your borders, coming into your communities. And it's not a matter of being heartless. It's a matter of being totally aware of everything. And you don't want to hurt my number one obligation, concern is I take an oath to protect the people of the United States, right? And so that's my first concern, to defend and protect. Um, I think that right now we have to become more aware of what's going on, and it's good to have an open heart and have open doors, but also don't have a closed conscience about what's going on right now. We have to make sure who's coming here is the right person, and so we've really tried to get more understanding on that, but it's become, we're not looking at the policy; it's becoming political. And again, as soon as it goes to that, then we're losing the best parts of what it is that we do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even when you were talking about energy, I feel like that too is another imports. We're getting so many external resources from other countries and other, continents where it's that way too. It's coming at us from all angles, right? It's constantly coming in, and it's sort of because of where I've lived, probably all the other places I've lived. When I would come home and I'd hear, oh, Butler's the heroin capital of, and I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Why is that the conversation that we're having, and what are we doing about it? Because if it's readily available, I mean, I lived in Boston where I would be walking my dog and I'd have to 311 take a picture of a needle in the alley and report it, and within like 2 minutes there was someone there picking it up. And we can't go there. We can't get to that point. But I think we have come a long way in
Yeah.
what I'm learning in this, as far as the resources and the support out there. But there's so many layers to this, right? We talk about We talk about you can have two twins, you can have two
Yeah.
children. One of them could drink alcohol in moderation and never have a problem, where the other one could become an alcoholic and then go to drugs. Teenagers are going to experiment. And as much as they talk about the Say No to Drugs campaign and how, well, that just didn't work because teenagers, they're going to go to parties, they're going to drink beer, they're going to try drugs. There's an underlying mental health issue. You could have four siblings, right, from the same household, brought up by two very well established parents, teaching them all of the things that you need to learn, right? And all it takes is just that one thing for one of them to not be able to handle it. And that's the hard part, right?
I'm Joe Mahoney, Executive Director at the Ellen O'Brien Geyser Center, and it's time for another mental health lightbulb moment. The same neurotransmitters that are linked to common mental health diagnoses, such as dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine, are also tied to substance use. This demonstrates that the connection between substance use and mental health is strong, as they both impact the same area of our brains. Substance use also can alter these neurotransmitters.
Yeah. So as we talk for parents, my greatest fear is the loss of the future of really talented people, for whatever reason, whatever happened, and genetically.
Yeah.
There's some people that walk through it and it doesn't bother them, and there's other people that's like, wow. My dad used to talk about all the time because our name is Kelly, but my grandmother's name was Simmelsberger, so we were Irish German. And if you talked to my grandmother, we were German Irish. My grandfather thought we were Irish German, but now my mother's
like
side
that.
was all Irish, and it was
Yeah.
funny because my dad would say, "Now listen, you have to be careful because your mother's side of the family like to drink." I said, "Yeah, well, I think it's kind of funny." He goes, "Oh, in moderation, okay, everything in moderation." And I think the view of parents is really important, and I think that one of the things I would lament more than anything else right now is the destruction of a nuclear family. Listen, now in my lifetime, and it was just more. It was a guy and girl become a husband and wife, become a mother and father. Once they become a mother and father, the foremost thing in their life was their children and getting them raised and getting them start and hoping everything would be good for them. And I just think that today, when we look at a lot of the policies that are out there, and especially when it comes to addiction, we understand people who are alcoholics. And I guess we say, well, there were some drunks in our family. But when it comes to the narcotics, it's like, oh, they're druggies. They're druggies. It's a negative connotation. I get that. But when you think about who it is that's being infected by this early on and losing an entire lifetime of being somebody who could contribute, somebody who could be a maker, somebody who could really be a difference in people's lives, I think the loss of that is incredible. No, I don't know. I don't know how we stem it. It has become such a profitable business. Look, we went through it right with cigarettes, and so we did that by raising the tax on a pack of cigarettes. We went through with prohibition, and all of a sudden it was, well, we wanted to keep people from drinking, but gosh, we lost a lot of revenue because we weren't taxing this product. This thing that we deal with right now, it's incredible. The cost, long range cost, just today, what it's costing us and what it's going to cost us long range is off the charts. And we have to do something about it. I don't know what the answer. I wish I did. I've watched it from somebody who's 14 years old, and now they're at a different age, and their life's been interrupted, and they're considered a criminal because of their addiction. And it's hard to get the two together.
You had said that about being a youth football coach.
Yeah.
And going to funerals of these young men. And this is what you started to go into, the loss of potential. Like it's an incredible, you use the word incredible loss of potential. And that to me was like, Tammy and I both were like scribbling down on our notepads and thinking, someone who is an addict or a recovering addict and maybe sober a year, and then it's that one thing, that trigger, whatever, it slides them back into it, right? They don't have the mental capacity to realize that they have any potential. To your point, it's like, what are the policies? And some of these problems start with pharmaceuticals.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, there was a show on Hulu that I watched with Michael Keaton, best Batman ever. I'm just going to put that out there. Sorry, he was.
Totally agree.
He just was, right?
Yeah.
He just was. And people are like, oh, I'm like, nope, I'm not going to have the conversation. I'm not having a debate. I'm just letting you know that that's how I feel. You can feel however you want to feel about it, but that's who the best Batman was.
Yeah.
Anyways, off topic, Dope Sick, and it was about the coal mining. You know, these people in the coal mining of Virginia and West Virginia who they didn't have the money to go see doctors to get their back fixed and have back surgery, and they were coal miners and they had to work. That's when Oxy came out. So they're getting these pills and they're building a resilience against getting to this point where it's like it's not working anymore. So then they have to up the dosage, and then it got to the point where they were snorting it, and then they're doing other drugs.
Yeah.
And so many people died from that. You specifically spoke of how many funerals you've been to, and I'm sure what was really hard about that is not only your personal experience with these boys, but thinking like seeing the loss of potential there, and there was this gap, right, where you didn't know that this was going on with them until they were gone.
They weren't bad kids; they were addicts, and I think that's the hardest thing for a parent because people say, "Well, your kid really fell off the wagon," and blah blah blah. So you know what? That loss of that life and that talent is incredible and is irreparable if you're a parent. But I would go from time to time, and unfortunately, go to funeral homes, and that have the picture of a player, maybe somebody that played for me when they were on the Penn Street team, or maybe that when they played little baseball for me, and see that picture, and then you'd gaze in or kneel down to say a prayer at the coffin, and you just think, what happened? What happened? How did we lose you? What didn't we see happening? And I think the hard thing to realize is once the addiction takes place, there's part of your brain that shuts down. Your ability to say no turns to no, go. And a lot of people do that in order they start feeling bad about themselves. So they take the pill to feel good. Then they feel bad about taking the pill. And then they start to have little or no regard for themselves. And it's not a matter, people say, I can't believe they did that and they really had that effect on the family. I said, what about the effect they've had themselves? I mean, look, I understand that. As a parent, I understand that. As a grandparent, I understand that because we have 10 grandchildren right now. The availability of all this product is out there. And the early stages of starting on it is so innocent. Mm-hmm. And it's a graduation process. And you go from one thing to another to another. When my sister was dying, she had pancreatic cancer. They had prescribed Oxycontins for her. Now, me being brilliant, it was hard for her to swallow a pill. So I got a bowl and a stylus, and I would grind up that Oxycontin, and I'd put it in her drink.
Yeah. And
she would have these incredible things where she would get restless and just moving around. I was talking to her doctor. I said, I don't understand. I mean, even when I give her Oxycontin, apparently it has a reverse reaction. He goes, well, what do you mean? What do you do? He said, well, she has trouble swallowing, so I grind it up. And he goes, you do what? I said, I ground it up. She goes, oh my God, you took the fuse out, you put the product in, and it explodes right away. I said, well, nobody told me. I thought I was just trying to help her.
You were trying to help her not be in pain. You were trying to help her with her pain.
Yeah, but pain is subject, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people go through physical pain, they go through mental pain. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you need the release from the physical pain just to walk or to sleep or to eat. And sometimes you need the other to get a release from where you think you are in your life. And unfortunately, I think this has a doubling effect. You don't want to depend on it, but then you do. And then you feel really lousy about yourself because you did. None of these people walk around town with a sign on them that says, hey, you listen, champion me because I'm an addict. They don't. They feel horrible about it. Yes. And getting them the help that they need and then giving them the support that they need afterwards. We would not do this if somebody would. And again, I don't want anyone to say, I don't believe he's talking this way. If you're a cancer victim, we're going to do everything we can to help you.
No, Dr. Brophy made that same point. You're not kicking a cancer patient to the curb and saying, oh, you have cancer for the second time. Like, we're not going to help you with this. Like, get it together, snap out of it. And you had made that point in saying it's not helpful when someone relapses. Statistics say that the more times that someone goes back to get help, the percentage of them recovering goes up. But our language, not what we say, how we say it, oh, they're in rehab again. Oh, they're off, like you said, fell off the wagon again. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, but let's help them get back on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Give them a chance, because a lot of times they are already mentally thinking, oh, I can't believe I did it. I was sober for a year. I can't believe I'm doing this again. Because I've talked to them. I've sat down and talked to them. How do we change the direction of the stigma behind addiction? The words that we're using. You had mentioned someone sitting down at your table and making a comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you had to be the one to say,
I know. People don't mean to be, because I think when you and I talked, a friend of mine said, well, the problem you need to do, you just need to kick the living daylights out of that kid. I said, why? I wish I had talked to you when my sister Joyce was dying. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, she had pancreatic cancer and she was dying. He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, maybe if I just kicked the living daylights out of her, she would have been all right. He goes, well, no, you're talking about something different. I said, I'm talking about something that's exactly the same. And that's the problem. It's the perception of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes, well, there's no problems in our family. There's just a lot of things we don't talk about. That child becomes an outcast because you almost become ashamed of them, as opposed, and now, listen, I know it's hard. Putting your arm around them, listen, you know what? Mom and I are always going to be there for you. Well, what can we do to help you? And knowing that it's about a 95% recidivism, it's really hard. There's a few that make it through. Not everybody does, but they're always that one bad day away from jumping ship and jumping back on it.
Yes.
It's a bad deal.
And the fact that you are that support system, there's a lot of people out there that don't have that. I mean, I talked about that moving back to Butler and how mentally I was in a place where I needed to focus on my mental health. And the phone call with my mother was, I'm not okay. I have to come home.
Well, you know the other side of it. It's okay to not be okay.
Absolutely.
The only thing that isn't okay is for people to say, you're not worth helping anymore. That's the worst thing we can do to anybody on any one of these things. And I don't care what it is. And I think that's really where the best of us can come out.
Yes.
And the worst of us can come out. And, one of the things, I had a colleague one time, we were at a thing together working, and his comment was, here's the problem. Employers need to hire these kids when they come out of these situations. And I listened to him and I said, you know what? First of all, I appreciate what my colleague just said, but there's a little problem with that. It's called liability. When you bring somebody onto your workforce or onto your team that has that problem, if they have an event and something goes wrong, you're held responsible because you tried to help somebody. And I said, until we can get by that, how do you fix that? How do you fix that liability? And it's like, well, first of all, society has to be understanding that there are things like that happen. You may have had cancer and got cured, but then picked up something else. My buddy Richie Saul went through that. And I watched how he struggled with his illness and went from one type of cancer to another type of cancer to another type of cancer. And for those people who know Rich Saul, and I thought to myself, if Rich Saul can get sick, anybody can get sick. And then I realized we're all human beings.
Yeah.
We're all vulnerable to all these things. And so as much as I hated to lose him, I watched his fight, and it was remarkable. But that's just who he was. The same with his brother Ronnie, same type of thing that happened.
Yeah.
These were the two most gifted people I had ever known, the strongest people, just everything about them. And for them to get sick, then you start to realize, well, what makes you think you're not going to get sick? And the other thing is, once you start having children, I think this is going to be, I don't want fathers to get mad at me. It's either easier for fathers to say, hey, look, we just got to get through this. Moms live every single moment with their children. They celebrate their wins and they grieve with all their losses. It's with them all during the day. It's with them while they're sleeping. It's in their dreams, and they wake up with the same worries they had before they went to sleep. I think, to me, in a relationship, women are so much more intuitive. They are so much more caring. And I'm not telling you dads out there, you're not caring. I get it. I'm just telling you, moms can't ever just say, well, look, they're just going to have to get through it. No, they're not.
Do you think it's possible for us to create more legislation on the subject of stigma? And if so, how? I mean, how do we?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. Look, it's already against the law to use. All right. So I don't think there's any law you could put in place that would say, you know what, we stopped it by passing this law. I think what you can do is look at funding that could go into the intervention or the recovery process. And the other thing is, in order for a person, you have to have purpose in life. So you go through this situation, and because of the liability, nobody wants you. They just don't want you. So I'd love to have you come here to work with us, but doggone it, if you slip, then it comes back on me. So as much as I'd love to help you, I can't. It's that sense of worthlessness. I think that when we look at whatever drives people to do whatever it is that they do, whatever their habit is, and it could be anything, and it could come at any part of your life. I don't know how we get beyond that stigma of that. It's we talked earlier. It's like mental health, and people say, well, there's no problems in our family. There's just a lot of things we don't talk about. We choose not to talk about it because there's nothing we can do about it. I know from our own situation. You have those days where you think, I just don't know, what weren't we seeing? What didn't we see? And why can't we change it? Part of the disease is that it affects your ability to distinguish right from wrong, to say no, 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 as opposed to go, go, go. And I think that's the hard part. And we can't get over that. We talked earlier, there's nobody feels worse about being an addict than an addict. And they use
Yes.
to get away from feeling that way. And then they feel horrible because they did it again. And it's like, oh my gosh.
So it's a cycle.
Yeah, it is. It's a continuous cycle. Wow, it really takes, it's going to take more than just mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles. It's going to be a society that is willing to say, you know what, there is still a lot of potential in this person. Let's not make their life useless because of this. And I think that's really, I think that that's a hard thing to do. That's a hard thing to do. So as I said earlier, the liability that goes with all this. And so when people say, well, they just need to get a job, I said, that's fine. Resumes are very important to whom you are. If somebody came in with that resume and it was on their resume, you'd say, listen, go ahead, fill it out. We don't need anybody right now, but if something opens up, we'll give you a call. And they don't want to say, hey, listen, I got to tell you, man, with the habits you have, we're going to touch you with the 10-foot pole. Good luck. Go someplace else. And I think that, again, it's the rejection that drives the injection. And you look at this stuff and say, wait, I'm glad I don't have that. So you don't. Every one of us owns some part of this. It's a loss of potential. It's the loss of life. It's the loss of everything that we grow up thinking we want to be someday. And it's that loss of ever reaching that goal. And you look in the mirror and say, there, but for that guy, I would have achieved my goals, because there's nobody harder on people than themselves.
100%. I mean, that's something that I'm so glad that you said that, even when we talked about it earlier, and hearing that from someone who has experienced this.
Yeah, what's the old saying? It's easy to talk the talk. Try walking the walk.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I can give people all kind of advice. Just don't put it in my ballpark and say, well, okay, that's right. You have great advice. Now, how will you handle, because it's happening right now with you? And say, well, I don't know. And so it is that fact. I think maybe we used to get it through our families, right? About what to do and what not to do. And my dad was always cautioning me. He said, part of being Irish is, you like the drink. And I said, well, yeah, I really do. He says, well, that in moderation. Okay. And that was okay until St. Patrick's Day. And then I didn't care. I said, man, I'm having
You're
fun.
like, I'm Irish.
I knew where I started, but I never knew where I was going to end up.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my friends got me home, or at least close to home. And now I don't do it at all. I don't do it all. And it's not because I had some awakening. When I just got to the point, like, what are you, some kind of a nutball? You're wasting money on something that you have.
Whole day.
Momentarily, you think it's a big deal. And the next day, all you have is a headache, or you're sick for a couple of days from what you've done. Don't be stupid. Gosh, if I had the answer, I would come up with a piece of legislation right now today, and I'll bet you every member of the House and every member of the Senate would sign it, until we're able to find something. And I know a lot of it comes back. It's not legal to do, but again, that market's so huge, and the profits. We see what the profits are of this, and we're not talking about people made a couple thousand. We start talking about billions of dollars worth
Yes.
of sales, and it just creates this, the losses mount up.
But this is what we're losing. This is greater than this. It's finding that balance, but every legislation starts with a conversation,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's true. I mean, so early intervention, but before the intervention, you have to be aware that it's actually happened, because there's so many instances that said, I didn't know my son or my daughter was even doing this.
Mhm.
Um, but then there's paying attention. Parental watching over is really critical. Now, I was fortunate and blessed that my grandparents, both families, where I was around them all the time. My parents, I was around all the time. All my friends, their parents were around all the time. And so it used to be that parents watched other people's children as well as their own. They coached other kids that weren't their own. They did all these things. It was, I don't know whether there was more of a stronger nucleus then, maybe. I don't know. I just watched today, and it's just too much. We have too many latchkey kids to begin with. Uh, there should always be somebody there that gives you a kiss goodbye in the morning and then welcomes you home at night and then helps you with your homework, and you're able to sit at a dinner table with family. I don't think there's anything more important or than family. And I really think that is such an important influence on who it is that you are. So we got to, you know what? If I had the answer, I would come up with a piece of
Yeah.
legislation tomorrow. Um,
Well,
would
the
just hope-
conversation started, right?
yeah,
It's-
yeah.
it's
And
out there
it has
and-
to be. We have to have it, whether you like it or not. We better be talking about it in schools. We better be talking about the what could happen and the negative effect of all this, and
Mhm.
try to get there early. Although just in growing up, I got a lot of people that told me things when I was young, and I said, yeah, right, that's for somebody else. And then later on, it's like, they told you not to touch the stove
They were right.
because you get burned if it's a hot stove. And you don't know what that means until you actually touch it. You go, oh my God, now I know what it means. Well, I remember when Hillary Clinton took, it takes a village. That's a true statement. And that is true in life. It takes a village.
It does. Yeah.
And if we can concentrate on what our most valuable asset is, it is our children.
Yes.
They say it's 25% of our population, 100% of our future. So if you want to have a really bright, great, successful future, let's make sure we're getting people ready to enter that arena and then perform at the level we'd like them to perform at. But that's also important to a strong nuclear family.
And being that example, like teamwork makes the dream work.
Amen.
I mean, you have a team. Like you said, all these things that, all this financial stuff, you have a team that takes care of all that stuff. You're like,
yeah,
but,
so
you have all these people that their input.
I think it's great because a lot of us watch athletics all the time, and I think when you see now that some of the biggest people in the game that are great, all they talk about is the team. That's all they say. Well, if it hadn't been for my line, if it hadn't been, and it all comes down to a really strong nuclear family, a nuclear society that realizes what it is, that the challenge we have going forward. History we can't change, but we can change how we react in the future from it. So study history to find out, don't do these type of things because it doesn't work well. There's a way to do it, but don't do it that way. We learn from that. Yeah, I think one of the things that really, to me, is important, and especially in public office, I really believe that people should have spent time in the private sector before they go into public office. I work with a lot of people who've never been in the private sector, who get a paycheck come hell or high water, whether things are good or bad, they get the same paycheck. But I really, a friend of mine, a former mayor of Butler, Leonard Pintel, told me one time, he said, Mike, I really believe that before you serve in public office, you should have been fired once from the job that you were in, and that you had a job where you got paid on commission only, which is positive production. And I said, wow, that's a great idea. And I tell people all the time, look, they may not be happy with what's going on right now in our city, in our township, our county, our state, or our country. Every one of those people just didn't walk in and sit down. You elected them. So if you're somebody who says, well, I don't believe in voting anymore because my vote doesn't count, my first response is, you're absolutely right. But why, you don't think I should vote? I said, no, if you don't vote, your vote doesn't count. That's what I mean. But here's what I want you to do. Not only register, would you please do a little background check people's resumes? I hear from more people say, I wish you were more like this person or that person. I'll say, really? How much do you know about that person? Well, I saw him the other night with Hannity. I said, no, I didn't ask you about what he did last night or what she did last night. What is their background? What town did they come from? What kind of a home did they come from? What kind of education they had? And what did they do before they got here? Because if there's no game films on them, and for athletes, you're not getting recruited if you don't have game film. Nobody just says, what is nice, kind of a nice looking kid I thought would bring him and give him a full scholarship. BS. Man, that's competitive.
Yeah.
And the reason it's competitive is because the guys that bring you in, if they're not competitive, they lose their job. So I just think that listen, we are so blessed. There's no country in the world like this. There's no nation that's ever been like this. We're the most giving people in the world. We just ask people, there have been 1.5 million men and women in uniform that have given their lives to allow us to still to practice this incredible business of self-government. Please research who it is that you're going to vote for. Check their resume, and don't get turned off because of a tweet. Look at policy. What is it that they're talking about? If it makes the country stronger, if it develops a workforce, if we develop the youth group that we have coming up, those are important things. If they're just some kind of a fancy talker, don't fall for that. Don't fall for that. So study who it is. Ask people in your community. I really believe the most important elected job in any community is school board. But don't go in because you don't like the football coach. Go in because you're concerned about curriculum, you're concerned about textbook, and you're concerned about your daughter's future or your son's future. And you know what? The answer may be not just what we consider education, but go technical. If you were to talk one place where we are really hurting right now, it's people that we would consider, well, those are blue-collar jobs. We don't like those. Really? I'll tell you what. Those are the salt of the earth people. They are the finest people in the world. And you have those talents and own those talents, you'll never get them.
This episode is brought to you by Butler County District Attorney Richard A. Goldinger, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Ego podcast. Be sure to click the link in bio for your discount for BetterHelp Therapy online. 10% off your first month. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Ego. Join me every Monday for a new episode. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and follow us on Instagram at Alter Ego Podcast. Thank you to Representative Mike Kelly for taking the time to discuss such an important topic. Join me next week as I sit down with Ken Klaus, who shares his personal journey with substance abuse, and Steve Troy, the author of Hope is Dope and New Eyes. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.